The 2007 Japanese Grand Prix is underway at Mount Fuji, on board with Kimi Raikkonen as he sees Rubens Barrichello make a fantastic start from second on the grid to take the lead from pole sitter Montoya into the tight first corner, and out of it is Rubens Barrichello who leads from Juan Pablo Montoya and the onboard Kimi Raikkonen. Now going into turn 3 before the long right of turn 4. Classic circuit remodelled for this season, replacing Suzuka as we go on board with Nick Heidfeld, running in 10th place. Started 10th, so he's where he started at the moment. He's chasing Sebastian Vettel. That's a wide line because look at that, the Super Aguri coming through up the inside. Was that Nico Hülkenberg? I believe so. Hülkenberg was up the grid compared to Lewis Hamilton. Now into this tight chicane, right, left, and then it opens out at the exit. And Takuma Sato having a look at Kimi Raikkonen as well. As Rubens Barrichello leads, he's had a very poor run of reliability, as have the whole Williams team. Massa himself has had 4 retirements in the previous 4 races. And he was looking good last time out at Spa as well. Looking good for a strong result before crashing out at the Stavolo curve. The Stavolo curve also claimed Alexander Wurz in the early stages and nearly Nick Heidfeld. But Nick Heidfeld managed to continue and finish 9th. So at the end of lap 1, it is Rubens Barrichello leading, Kimi Raikkonen having a look at his own teammates going into the first corner. Montoya braking very late, nearly contact between the two as we go through the apex. And now, there's the shot. And you can see the 2 Toyotas in the background. On board with 8th place Fernando Alonso, who sits behind the 2 Toyotas, who have been on some run of form of late. They have had 1-2s in the past 2 races at Istanbul. No, in fact, not at Istanbul, at Monza, and off the track goes Matthias Lauda, and spinning goes Matthias Lauda, nearly spinning, but holding on to that just about. But he's dropped down to last. Luckily for him, there were no cars behind him to get in the way, which is exactly what happened between himself and Lewis Hamilton last time out. Hamilton went off the circuit at Pouhon. He was in 4th or 5th position, I think 4th place actually. Went off at Pouhon and then rejoined right into off the track goes Jenson Button, and rejoining no problem ahead of Sebastian Vettel. In fact, there's a Toro Rosso up there as well, so that's had a good start. I have to see which one that is. It's probably Nico Rosberg. As starting lap 3, Kimi Raikkonen with the fastest lap as side by side just about. The switch to Takuma Sato, who's making a move on Kimi Raikkonen into the first corner. And now to Alonso making a move on Felipe Massa. That is for, I think that's for 6th position now, but not 100% sure on that. And I think BMW Sauber lost a position. Now the inside goes Alonso for 6th position into the 3rd corner. Now the long right. That's Nico Hülkenberg. He's having a look round the outside of Massa, going through the long right. Now he's got the inside into the left-hander and locking up at Massa, hanging on round the outside. That would have been a spectacular manoeuvre if Hülkenberg had pulled that one off, but not quite. Now through a series of kinks before the tight chicane. There's 3rd place Takuma Sato, who can win the championship in this race if he wins, and drivers behind him fail to score. In fact, he needs a 50 points gap going into the final 2 races in order to win the championship. At the moment he has 27 over Mark Webber, who sits 2nd in the championship. Jenson Button a further 13 behind, so Button is 40 points behind Takuma Sato. As look at that, we've got Toro Rosso making a move on, that must be Hamilton, is it? Going around the final corner. In fact, Hamilton sits behind the BMW Sauber, so I think Hamilton actually lost that position. But anyway, Sato in front of his home crowd, his adoring home crowd. And in front we've got, that was a battle for the lead actually between Barrichello and Juan Pablo Montoya. So we've got a lot of shuffling going on between the whole field. And at the moment it seems to be benefiting Takuma Sato because he is closing in on Montoya and Barrichello. Let me double check that because it might well be Kimi Raikkonen in the lead now, having taken that from Rubens Barrichello. Going through the kinks, Mark Webber versus, that is Montoya for 4th position actually. There is your race leader, and it is Kimi Raikkonen, so he has moved up the order past Montoya, past Rubens Barrichello. So Kimi Raikkonen on the move as 11th place Jenson Button. And he sits behind Sergio Perez, who's had a decent points run. He scored points at Istanbul and Monza. He was 7th at Istanbul and then 9th at Monza. So he finally broke his duck last time in over the past 3 races, although he suffered a loose wheel at Spa last time out. So down this mile-long straight, it sits at 1.5 kilometres, translated from miles. And Jarno Trulli having a look now at Nick Heidfeld, who's not had a good opening phase to the race, dropping back on what could be a heavy fuel load, but it could well be an imbalanced set of tyres. Trulli trying round the outside, he's got him. Long straight providing lots of good overtaking opportunities, it seems. And Rubens Barrichello losing a position to Takuma Sato around the long turn 4. Now exiting the left, let's see his traction compared to the Honda. And let's see his engine power compared to the Honda. It seems okay, even if the Williams hasn't had good reliability. Monza was... Oh, big collision there! That is Christian Albers, and I think it's Alexander Wurz behind as well. So both those drivers are definitely out of the race, and it's definitely a collision between the two. Now that was coming out of turn... That could be... It's around turn 4, so either they've crashed at the exit, which I think they have done. That's heading into the left-hander. I'm going to call it turn 5, but I could well be wrong on that. And Wurz still remains one of the only drivers without points. In fact, he is the only driver without points, as a new fastest lap for Kimi Raikkonen. So the top 7 in the championship can still win the championship. Although for Kimi Raikkonen it is very much a long shot, because he sits... In fact, no, he can't win the championship. He's 75 points behind Takuma Sato, and there are 75 points on offer for the win, but Sato already has 5 wins, Raikkonen has none. So Kimi Raikkonen cannot win the championship, no matter what happens. And that's a wide line there for the Super Aguri of Lewis Hamilton round the outside, attempting to buy Jarno Trulli, but he tucks back into the slipstream, into the dirty, turbulent air of the Super Aguri Mercedes-powered car, run by Mitchell, who will transfer allegiances next season to Red Bull and Toro Rosso. He's taken over the entire Austrian drinks company. The Austrian team of Red Bull and the Italian team of Toro Rosso. That's Jenson Button. He's under pressure from Nico Rosberg. Remember, Button made a mistake at this very corner here a few laps ago. Got a bit too wide on the entry, and as a result sits down in 11th position. He's struggling a bit on his Michelin-tired Toyota as Raikkonen sets another new fastest lap. That's Nico Hülkenberg making a move on Juan Pablo Montoya down the main straight. What a roar from the Japanese crowd this would be if the Super Aguri team gets a position over a McLaren, and I think Hülkenberg has done so. Locking up into the first corner is Felipe Massa. Behind him is Sergio Perez, who's driving quite well at the moment. Could he be challenging for points? There's somebody has stopped on the main straight. There's yellow flags out. Now who has stopped? Let's keep an eye out on the timing screens. It's Timo Glock out of the race with a suspension problem. And Glock's not had a good run of it of late. He sits on 21st in the championship with 12 points. 3 races in the points. That was an 8th place at Melbourne, a 7th place at... where was that? Well, there was a 9th place at Istanbul. The 7th place was at Silverstone. But his race at Fuji not working out as planned. So, Kimi Raikkonen still leads, and he's about to go on to his 8th lap now. He's 3 seconds ahead of Takuma Sato, and Rubens Barrichello sits in 3rd position at the moment. And another new fastest lap for Raikkonen. He is flying at the moment in his Pirelli-tired McLaren. There is Sato, 2nd, Barrichello 3rd, Webber 4th, as Rosberg and Jenson Button do battle on the main straight. Rosberg took Button on the previous lap, but Button looks as if he wants that position back. He's got it at the moment. Let's see what happens under braking into the first corner. That's Lewis Hamilton, you can see from underneath the rear wing of the Toro Rosso of Rosberg. And there's a Ferrari as well. Sergio Perez smoking his brake ever so slightly going into turn 3. Now the long turn 4, he's got Sebastian Vettel all over the back of him, and BMW, Sauber and Ferrari are involved in quite a hot battle for the Constructors' Championship. That's for 8th in the Constructors' Championship. They're only separated by 3 points, so one good result from either of those two teams could set them on the way to finishing 8th. Hamilton defending his position from Jarno Trulli, going into the tight chicane. Now into this dawdling final sector. I remember hating this on Gran Turismo 4. Much prefer the old... I didn't like it, basically. Just understeer city. I think Gran Turismo 4 was a very understeery sort of game, I seem to remember. Another new fastest lap for Kimi Raikkonen as he extends his lead over Takuma Sato to 3.6 seconds. Heidfeld's having a dreadful time of it. He's lost a number of positions. That was to Matthias Lauda, and he's lost another one to a Spiker. In fact, he's dropping back a lot, so I think Heidfeld's in trouble. Could well be seeing him retiring from the race. In fact, he's in the pits, so he has made the pits. So Heidfeld lives for another day. That's Jenson Button we're on board with now into turn 3. Now the long turn 4 once again. And we're at the point of the silly season as well, so teams looking to make bids on multiple different drivers, seeing who fancies driving for who next season. And there'll be a shift around in who manages what team as well. So keep an eye out for those when the 2008 season begins. Rosberg's still all over the back of Jenson Button. They're all tucked up behind Felipe Massa at the moment for 8th position, so there is a minimum 5-car battle for 8th at the moment. They consist of Massa, Perez, in front of this battling duo of Button and Rosberg is Sebastian Vettel. Once again, Kimi Raikkonen sets the fastest lap, and the gap between himself and Takuma Sato, as a result, goes up a little bit more. As the graphic changes from time to the number of stops, only one driver has made a pit stop so far, Nick Heidfeld, and that was unscheduled. Rubens Barrichello, there's Mark Webber, and there's the impressive Fernando Alonso, who is within a chance of a championship despite not having won a race all season. He's had a number of podium finishes, 5 to be exact. A second, a third, 2 more seconds and then another third, which was achieved at the last race at Spa. Held under wet conditions, first wet race of the season, and it was pretty much wet throughout. And it seemed to be dominated by the Toyotas of Button and Webber, 1-2 finish, Alonso 3rd. And who finished 4th in that? It was Takuma Sato. Hulkenberg 5th. 2 Renaults performing particularly strongly in that race, with 6th and 7th. But it was quite a manic set of final laps because I think, by the looks of it, Sebastian Vettel had made one fewer stop than most of the field and had got himself up in 6th position at one point, but grimly hanging on from both Renaults and a number of other cars. I think it must have been about a 7 or 8 car train at the end of the race. But Vettel finished 8th, Heidfeld finished 9th, and taking the final point in that race was Christian Albers. And Trulli was 11th. And Sutter was a classified finisher at the last race, 12th, despite having pulled off the circuit on the final lap with a suspension problem. Same thing happened to him at Istanbul as well. He pulled over on the final lap whilst running in the points, but it was a different problem altogether, out of fuel. So that was unfortunate for the Spiker driver. Jenson Button, he's lost the position to Rosberg and he's lost a couple more to Trulli and Hamilton, so Button's had a bad lap here somewhere. And he's lost 3 positions. So they're all stuck behind Massa. Perez still can't get past. Massa himself is 3.7 seconds behind Juan Pablo Montoya. Right on cue, there is the battle between Perez and Massa for 8th position. And it looks as if Massa has got a good car in a straight line because Perez hasn't been able to get close and make an overtake. Let's see what happens as he exits this left and then the final rights. We switch to Robert Kubica, who's struggling a bit in the Renault, locking up his right front. But he still sits 2.5 seconds ahead of Matthias Lauda. Now into the final corner. Starts off open and then tightens all of a sudden. It's quite wide there as well, so if you make a mistake there, it is a little bit forgiving. switching back to Kimi Räikkönen, race leader, now on lap 12. Matthias Lauda, he's defending a lot now. Rosberg, he's got ahead of Sebastian Vettel for 10th position, so Nico Rosberg moves into the points. And if he stays there, that'll be his first points since Monaco, believe it or not. Toro Rosso have been without a principal since... Oh, spin! That's Perez! As Perez and Massa collided, actually, because both are dropping down the order. I think so. Perez has had a go, and it's gone wrong. It's gone very wrong. Look at that. Both are out of the race. Well, Perez is out of the race, at least, and Massa's out as well. So I'd expect that to be Perez's fault, because he was the one making the overtake, and it's gone wrong. So bad race for BMW Sauber, with Heidfeld way down the order as well. Kiss any chance of points goodbye. So, lap 13 is still Kimi Räikkönen, 5 seconds ahead of Takuma Sato now, so he's pulling out that gap constantly. And it's an impressive performance from Räikkönen as well. Things went badly for McLaren at the last race at Spa, both drivers failed to finish. Kimi Räikkönen actually, it was an Alba's off-track moment at Pouon, and then rejoining into the path of Räikkönen, who promptly spun, and then Suttle came along and just collected him. So that forced Suttle into the pits with a new front wing, and Räikkönen was stranded with a missing wheel. So we're having a look at Mark Webber, but there is his main championship rival Takuma Sato. And still this kerfuffle goes on. Jenson Button's still dropping positions. That's dropped a position to a Renault now of Daniel Ricciardo. So Button having a horrendous race at the moment. And now the queue is still headed by Sebastian Vettel, but now it's got Hamilton, Ricciardo and Button all over the back of him. So we haven't even reached quarter distance, so we've seen quite some action and quite a few accidents as well. A few drivers making mistakes in the early part of the race. And another new fastest lap for Kimi Räikkönen. So I suspect that Räikkönen is running a lighter fuel load, because we've seen Takuma Sato be very quick all season. And, Kubica just about hanging on to the circuit. But his mistakes are causing the cars behind. It's a spiker. And it must be Adrian Suttle, because Albers is out of the race. And Matthias Lauda behind as well. To close up on the Renault driver. Did well at Spa, finished 6th, Ricciardo 7th, but at the moment Renault's best chance of points looks to be Daniel Ricciardo, who's making a move into turn 3, but off Sebastian Vettel, but not making that one stick. Now he's got Jenson Button to deal with through the long right. And no collision between those two, unlike Perez and Massa. I'm going to assume that they both collided, as it seems the most likely outcome that both crashed out. So it looks like Mark Webber is closing in on Rubens Barrichello now for 3rd position, so we've seen Toyotas have very good race pace pretty much all season actually. They're very competitive, and it's helped them to a number of wins. It's helped Jenson to 3 wins and Mark to 2 wins. Mark's 2 wins came at Sepang and Silverstone, and Button's 3 wins came at Barcelona, Monza and Spa. As a result, they now lead the Constructors' Championship. They're on 299 points, and the gap between themselves and their nearest rivals McLaren. While McLaren sit on 245 points, so it's a gap of 54 points. Let's have a look at Daniel Ricciardo making a move on Sebastian Vettel for 11th position. That did not quite work out. As through the chicane goes Räikkönen, still extending his lead over to Takuma Sato. So all the shuffling now means that Alonso is now 5th, and 6th place is the impressive Nico Hülkenberg, who's been wanted by a few teams, as is this driver Daniel Ricciardo. A lot of drivers bidding on the Australian, who's been very impressive actually since he took over from Kamui Kobayashi. Has had quite a few point scores. And let's have a look actually and see how he did. So he's taken part in 8 races so far and has scored points in 5 of them, so he's done good. No wonder why everybody seems to want him. 6.7 seconds is the gap now between Räikkönen and Sato. should be expecting the first scheduled stops to come soon. And it will be interesting to see who does 2 stops. I'm expecting 2 stops all around, as usual, although we may get the rogue 1. Maybe Heidfeld has had to convert to a 3-stop strategy thanks to his earlier mechanical gremlin. Ricciardo versus Vettel now down the main straight. Once again, this long straight providing some action, and Jenson Button doesn't seem close enough to make a move. Look at that, Ricciardo had to go back into some slipstream, he didn't have enough engine power. Either that or he's running a bit too much drag. Or maybe the Ferrari is a very quick engine. There's Jenson Button to turn 3, Vettel locking up slightly. Now what's going to happen through turn number 4? Button, they're both trying to the outside line on Sebastian Vettel. He's going into turn 5-ish, but Vettel hanging on still. Now down the straight, 2 kinks to negotiate before the braking hard for the tight chicane. Is Ricciardo close enough to make a move? While Vettel is trying to defend. He's defended successfully at the moment, but I suspect he'll be vulnerable down the straight once again. So Kimi Raikkonen, there he is. Looking to try and kickstart McLaren's bid in the Constructors' Championship, and with Raikkonen leading and Montoya there or thereabouts, won't do them too much harm. Montoya actually sits 7th at the moment. About a second behind 6th place Nico Hülkenberg, who's having a very good race at the moment. From 13th on the grid as well, that is very impressive actually from Nico Hülkenberg. There's Nick Heidfeld, who had that unscheduled pit stop earlier on, and is struggling to catch up to Matthias Lauda. He's not actually doing so. So BMW Sauber don't look as if they're going to be scoring points unless, by some sheer fluke, everybody retires in front of Heidfeld. But on board with the German, who's not had a great run of it of late since Magny-Cours actually, when he did score points. He's only scored points in 1 race since, and that was at the last race at Spa. In fact, Heidfeld was one of those who did spin off in the wet conditions, and that's Vettel, that's having a go back at Ricciardo, and tagging the back of the Australian somewhere along the lines. Ricciardo made an overtake stick. Now where did Vettel go? I think Vettel has spun it. I think he has, because he's lost a position to Jenson Button, who got caught up in that melee as well. So Ricciardo took Sebastian Vettel somewhere on that lap, but Vettel's had a go back and has got it all wrong. In fact, there is Vettel. There is Vettel. And his left front wheel is spinning, so I wonder if he's spun and then Button has collected him and ripped a wheel off. Well, Vettel without a wheel, so I think that's what's happened. Expect to see Jenson Button making a pit stop if that is the case, as Vettel gets pushed out of harm's way. So a bad race for Vettel. That's a bit of a reprieve for BMW Sauber, who only sit 3 points behind the Ferrari. And Jenson Button is in the pits, so damage to Button's Toyota, probably on the front wing. And Button's race goes worse. So just having a look at the field. So Mark Webber, I think, is ahead of Rubens Barrichello now, so an overtake has taken place there. Webber moves up to 2nd. Not a net 2nd, because Kimi Raikkonen made that pit stop. Hülkenberg in the pits as well, so Kimi Raikkonen, having made his pit stop, now dropped down the order. That's an early first stop, but should still be 2 stops. And Hülkenberg pitting early as well, so those on the lower fuel now can make inroads into Kimi Raikkonen's race lead. Particularly this driver here, Takuma Sato. Exiting turn 5-ish. They do have names to some of these corners, but I'm not too familiar with them, so I'm just going to have to refer them as to what they are. Such as this, the chicane. And Rubens Barrichello looking to try and keep up with Mark Webber, because if Webber is one who is making an earlier pit stop, then Barrichello needs to stay as close as possible. Kubica taking a very unusual line going down the main straight going into the first corner, so I wonder if he was trying to make a move on somebody. Let's double check that on the timing screen once it updates. Yes, he's in a battle with Matthias Lauda at the moment. I think Lauda has actually overtaken Kubica at some point. So there's a battle there. And Kubica on the wrong end of it. Honda have improved actually as the season's gone along in terms of their overall car performance. Sato's still a very quick driver, but Lauda is now scoring points. He scored points at the Nürburgring, at the Hungaroring and at Istanbul, so not doing too badly now is Matthias Lauda, although he does lock up his tyre going into the fiddly final sector. Into the left part of it, now the final corner. And coming out of the final corner, it is Matthias Lauda in 13th position at the moment, with Robert Kubica in 14th place. But pit stops are underway, and Kubica's having a look at Matthias Lauda going down the main straight underneath the Fuji advertisements. Very fitting as we are at Mount Fuji. And into the first corner, can Kubica make that move stick? Let's keep an eye on the timing screen as we look at Rubens Barrichello going through the fiddly final sector by the looks of it. Got Mark Webber in front of him. And now coming out of the fiddly final sector, Lauda did hang on to 13th place ahead of Kubica, so braving it round the outside is the Austrian. One of two Austrians in this race, but Wirtz's retirement means that there's still just one running. You can see the grandstands on the left there. So Sato continuing for another few laps before... They're all locking up going into that corner, so it seems very tricky under braking at this circuit. At the moment, Sato has a gap of 6 seconds to Mark Webber. And it's gone down a little bit in this first sector. 5.6 seconds is the gap between himself and the Australian. And 2.6 seconds is the gap between Webber and Barrichello, who locks up going into 5-ish. Now going through the kinks, Rubens Barrichello desperate for some points. And he sits 6th in the championship actually, so he's still mathematically within a shot of the championship, but he's going to need a lot of luck. He's going to need that driver and the one in front of him to retire if Barrichello is going to challenge for any championship glory. Like Alonso and Raikkonen, yet to score a win this season. We've seen 6 different winners this season, and they consist of Takuma Sato, Mark Webber, Jenson Button, Juan Pablo Montoya, Robert Kubica, and Felipe Massa. And speaking of pole sitters, we have seen Rubens Barrichello take 2 pole positions in this season. Montoya has taken 5 pole positions, that's the most out of any driver on the grid. Massa's taken a pole, Sato's taken 3, and Button's taken 3 as well. So there's been a bit of a variety in terms of pole sitters, but in terms of pole sitter king, it currently is headed by Juan Pablo Montoya. At the moment he sits in this race 6th, yet to make his first pit stop, and we are approaching the deep part of the first pit stop window. We're on lap 22. At the moment is Takuma Sato who leads. And smoking his front tyres is Nick Heidfeld, and off the track goes Jenson Button and nearly spinning it, but getting caught out in the dirty air of the BMW Sauber it seems. As Matthias Lauda, I don't think he's in the pits, I think he's just lost the position to Robert Kubica going down the long main straight. As into the pits comes Takuma Sato. That's a pit stop for the Japanese driver, so let's see where he rejoins in relation to Kimi Raikkonen, as Lauda has a look at Kubica going into 5-ish, but not making that one stick. Now keep an eye out, Sato versus Raikkonen. Raikkonen probably coming down the main straight now. Temporarily it is Mark Webber in the lead from Rubens Barrichello. Alonso sits 3rd, and the lock-up going into the left of the fiddly final sector is Adrian Sutil. Sato is not ahead of Raikkonen, so let's see where he rejoins. But Raikkonen's probably going to rejoin safely in the lead once all the first pit stops are done. Currently sits 4th. Sato rejoined behind Lewis Hamilton, so 9th position at the moment, but it should well be a net 2nd once Webber, Barrichello et al. Have made their first pit stops. On board with Rubens Barrichello, he's got Fernando Alonso closing in a little bit. That'll be interesting to see whether Webber, Barrichello and Alonso make their pit stops first. Still got Montoya and Rosberg and Trulli and Hamilton to make their first pit stops as well. As Jenson Button once again smokes up his tyres going into the first corner. Seems that the further down you are, the more likely you are to lock up. We've seen Heifeld have a few monster lockups. Jenson Button's had a few. And just looking at the bottom of the graphic there, Alonso in the pits. So I think Barrichello is safe once he makes his first pit stop, unless Alonso does some demon outlaps, or Barrichello makes a hash of his in-lap. Of course, they all refuel. So the lighter your car is, the faster you'll go. Lauda dropping back a little bit from Robert Kubica now, 13th position Robert Kubica. Both of these drivers have yet to make their first pit stops, so I'd expect them to fall behind Heifeld and Button once they come into the pits. There's third place Kimi Raikkonen now, and by the looks of it, he's extended the gap a little bit over Sato, if it is 6 seconds or if it's 10 seconds, but I will double check that for you. Through the tight chicane goes Raikkonen. And the gap is 10 seconds between Raikkonen and Sato, so Raikkonen has extended the gap between himself and the Japanese driver. So it's looking good for Kimi Raikkonen at the moment if he can keep this up. But there's Mark Webber, and I think Barrichello heading into the pits for his first pit stop. So Webber holds onto the lead at the moment, and once he makes his first pit stop, then that will put Kimi Raikkonen back into the lead of the race. Raikkonen will rejoin, well, to assume second place at the moment, but will take the lead once Webber makes his stop. Gap is 17.3 seconds between Webber and Raikkonen. I think Webber should rejoin in third position once Montoya makes his first pit stop. Another lockup, this time from Nick Heidfeld, as Jarno Trulli also makes a pit stop as well for his Ferrari team. Daniel Ricciardo in the pits. So this is now the time where the last of the one-stoppers are taking place. Now a key battle actually will be versus Montoya and Hulkenberg. Can Montoya put in a good set of in-laps to rejoin ahead of Nico Hulkenberg? That will be the interest in this final round of stops, final round of first pit stops. And at the moment, Montoya is dropping back from Kimi Raikkonen, who seems to have the car absolutely hooked up in the Japanese Grand Prix. That's Trulli versus Lauda going through the long five-ish and now the straight with the kinks. Trulli has made his pit stop, Lauda I don't think has. And in front of those two is Kubica. That's Rosberg behind, and that's Heifeld, that's Hamilton also behind. So into the final fiddly sector, it's Trulli, it's Lauda, it's the battle for 10th position as Webber finally makes his pit stop and has rejoined third at the moment, but Montoya has got another few laps to go before he makes his first pit stop, and Webber just ahead of Sato. Now that's a move. Webber has jumped Sato in the pit stops. So that's a key one, and that's a key one in the championship battle as well, because with the gap just 27 points between Webber and Sato, that will help Webber's cause to try and catch up to the Japanese driver. Now if he stays second and third, it will be 3 points, so Webber just needs a little bit more if he's going to realistically challenge for the championship, as we have a look at Button versus Heidfeld for the battle to avoid being last. As Lauda gets it wide at 4 and breaks into 5. Still trying to catch up to Trulli before he makes his first pit stop. Himself and Kubica and Suttle, for that matter, all yet to make their first pit stops. As he goes through the kinks, brakes hard for the chicane, hits the apex quite well, hits the other apex quite well as well, as he tries to challenge for points, but he'll do well too, I think. Kimi Raikkonen. has a net 10-second lead over Mark Webber, and he's still pulling away from Montoya, who still hasn't made his first pit stop, so him dropping back from pole position at the start was explained by a very heavy fuel load. Webber does what he can to try and making a bit of a mess of turn 4 actually, and where is Takuma Sato? Keep an eye out on the mirror below to see if he's there. Turns through the kinks. Can't see Sato yet. So he looks okay. Mark Webber hanging on grimly. Missing the apex quite noticeably, so I wonder if he's gone for a heavy middle stint as Alonso... Is that Alonso versus Hulkenberg for 5th position? It is. So Hulkenberg flying at this stage of the race, and he's got Fernando Alonso right in front of him. He's had a very good season as Hulkenberg, who's... looks as if he made well beyond the move, but nobody knows where everybody's going yet. They can only assume from the bids that people have made in the spreadsheet. There's a spreadsheet being kept around at the moment, and it's got a list of drivers and the bids, but not where they're going. It's going to be exciting when the 2008 season roster has been revealed. Now that's Hulkenberg versus Alonso down the main straight and into the first corner. Who's got the advantage? It's Hulkenberg! Hulkenberg takes 5th position away from Fernando Alonso, and he's having a brilliant race. Let's hope he stays there, and Hulkenberg overtook Hamilton actually for the Drivers' Championship, speaking of which he's making a move on Nico Rosberg down the main straight. So both Super Aguris on the move in this middle sector of the race. And really, they're having quite a good season. They've had points regularly in most of the races, and they sit 7th in the championship. If Hulkenberg does well, then he could jump up to 6th in the championship, could Super Aguri. But we've still got a good side of 40 laps to go in this race. We're on lap 28. Big lock-up for Alonso going into the left of the Fiddlies. Now into the final corner. It certainly won't do his tyres any good. And Hulkenberg just driving away from him. He's pulled out a massive gap on this lap over Alonso. Keep an eye on the bottom, see what it is, but we're having a look at Suttil. Now that's a slow Rubens Barrichello, isn't it? I'll have to double check that one, but it looked as if Rubens Barrichello was in some sort of trouble. Yes, he's been to the pits very early for his second stop, so that's unscheduled. Rubens Barrichello. Once again, Williams not showing good reliability. Monza was a very disastrous race for them. They had engine failures within a lap of each other, right at the start of the race as well, so looks as if the cooling was not set correctly for that particular race. And the Ferrari engines in front of the home crowd as well. The home crowd did not like that at all. And talking of Ferrari, we're on board with Jarno Trulli, the sole remaining Ferrari in this race. Aside from the Ferrari engine Rubens Barrichello, whose problem I'm sure will be rectified in that pit stop. But Trulli running in the points at the moment and looking for more points. Could be in trouble if he doesn't have a seat for next season according to the spreadsheet. And Montoya still carrying on. Is he one stopping, I wonder, because he's still in second position at the moment. Hasn't made a pit stop. So let's keep an eye on this, because that could change the race a little bit if Montoya is one stopping. And Suttil and Kubica and Lauda also haven't made pit stops yet, so there could be a mixture of 1 and 2 stops in this race. And it could be a 3-stop strategy for Heidfeld and Barrichello. As we are on board with Fernando Alonso, currently sitting in 6th position at the moment. So this Red Bull team, they sit 5th in the championship at the moment, but Alonso in particular has gotten the most out of what was probably the 5th fastest car on the grid. As Rosberg gets it a bit wrong. I think it was a bit of an oversteer moment in the middle of the corner. But just about hanging on at the exit. As he goes through the kinks. ING signs on the left, trees on the left, and what looks like some radio towers as well, and there's a blimp on the top as well. Mountainous regions in the background as well. Third place, Mark Webber. 5 seconds behind Juan Pablo Montoya, and trying to catch up to the Colombian. And it is crucial for him to do so if Montoya is one stopping. Once again, Montoya did not pit. So this is a battle between Jarno Trulli and Matthias Lauda. Keep an eye out on the slipstream effect. Here it comes. Now at the inside of Jarno Trulli goes Matthias Lauda. Keep an eye on the timing screens to see if it updates, because we are now looking at Kimi Raikkonen, race leader. Gaps coming down now between himself and Juan Pablo Montoya. Not surprising, as Montoya's fuel load is lightning, although Raikkonen was 3/10 quicker in the middle sector of that lap, and despite that slipstream and the inside line, Lauda did not make that stick. Trulli hanging on to 9th position, which for Ferrari is crucial because, once again, 3 points ahead of BMW Sauber in the Constructors' Championship, and it's a battle for 8th. So there's a long shot of Takuma Sato going down the main straight, trying to catch up to Mark Webber, who jumped the Japanese driver in the pit stops, and it's a grudge match as well between Toyota and Honda. Both manufacturer teams, both running Japanese manufacturer engines, because they have to. And at the moment it looks as if Toyota have the edge over Honda. Certainly not for Jenson Button's case, he's way down the order in 14th position. And certainly not for Matthias Lauda's case, although he does sit in 10th position at the moment. So the grudge match between Toyota and Honda looks firmly set between Webber and Sato. As once again Lauda fails to make an overtake work going into the first corner. Can't get alongside that powerful Ferrari engine. We saw Vettel hanging on earlier in the race over quite a lot of drivers. So it seems the Ferrari is very powerful, but very fragile. Now through the long right into 5-ish. Trulli missing the apex because Lauda got at the inside of him. So Lauda has finally managed to make an overtake work. Now can he hang on, because Trulli's back into the slipstream of the Honda. Lauda's defending up the inside. That was well defended going into the tight chicane. So Lauda takes 9th position at the moment. And probably on a one-stop strategy as well, along with Sutil, Kubica and Montoya, because we've now hit half distance and they still haven't made pit stops. Off the track just about goes Jenson Button, who's all over the curbs as he tries to make something out of what has been a dismal race for him. And his 2 wins as well put him into championship contention as well, so this has not done Button a lot of good at all. But Toyota do have a comfortable lead in the Constructors' Championship, so not all doom and gloom for Button and his team just yet. As through the fiddly sector goes Raikkonen, who's pulling out the gap now between himself and Montoya, so he's got the message to push a little bit, and he's doing so. Raikkonen holding nearly a 9-second lead over Juan Pablo Montoya at the moment, as that's a bit of a wide line for Lewis Hamilton, and getting back into it, he's lost a bit of time. Was catching up to Trulli at that point. And now he may come under pressure from his best mate Nico Rosberg for 11th position. There is the Toro Rosso driver. A lock-up for Trulli going into the tight chicane. Who else is going to lock up? Nobody just yet, but expect a few more of those. Now, is that Hulkenberg making a pit stop? I think it is. Hulkenberg in the pits for his 2nd stop of the race. Now, is this an early 2nd stop? It does seem that way, because we are just at half distance now. So there's a bit of a variety of strategies, it seems. Hulkenberg now having made 2. Is he 3 stopping, I wonder? And that could explain his rather strong pace in the middle of the race compared to Fernando Alonso. A much lighter fuel load. Not sure how this strategy will work out, but we'll see what happens. Where does he rejoin? He rejoins... Is that 8th position ahead of Matthias Lauda, or is he going to slip back? I think he's in 8th, so he has rejoined in 8th position ahead of Matthias Lauda. And what seems like a 3-stop strategy, he can basically push all the way to the end of the race, all the way to his next pit stop, and all the way after that as well. Kimi Raikkonen's in the pits as well, so that's an early pit stop for him as well. So he's made his 2nd pit stop before Montoya has even made 1. That's an interesting strategy split between the McLarens. Oh, Trulli! Oh my goodness, Trulli spun and then got collected by Lewis Hamilton. So there's a major incident there. Which corner was that? Was that going into turn 4? But in any case, that's Trulli out of the race. You can see a missing wheel, exactly like his teammate Sebastian Vettel. It's actually at the tight chicane, so Trulli's... I think what happened there, Trulli made a mistake coming out of the left part of the chicane, got a bit too wide, spun, and then got collected by the unfortunate Lewis Hamilton. So that's an interesting development going on there. But both Ferraris out of the race, which means they cannot extend the gap between themselves and BMW's Sauber. And Hamilton inevitably coming into the pits with damage on his front wing. We saw it on, I think it was his left-hand side, or his right-hand, Hamilton's right-hand side of the front wing, missing. So Raikkonen having made his 2nd pit stop, that's put Montoya into the lead of the race. And what's the gap between himself and Mark Webber? It is at 4 odd seconds. And still, lap 36, Montoya not having made a pit stop. So he's definitely... he must be one stopping in this race, and it's very possible that Raikkonen and Hülkenberg are 3 stopping. Most of the field probably has gone for 2 stops, but this is very interesting, and I'm not entirely sure who's going to win the race. You have to say, based on the strategies, it could well be Montoya, because he's pulling away a little bit from Mark Webber. But if Montoya has to make his first pit stop earlier, his only pit stop earlier than Webber has to make his 2nd, then it's looking good for Mark Webber actually to take another victory. But we'll find out in the final 32 laps or so. Lauda, I think, was making a pit stop. Yep, he's dropping down the timing screens. That'll be his only pit stop, I'm pretty sure of that. There is 2nd place Mark Webber going through the fiddly sector. That was where Kubica and Hamilton had their incident in real life F1. Kubica got the drive-through penalty for that one in what was very, very wet race. Montoya's in the pits. Into the pits comes Juan Pablo Montoya for his, what probably is his only pit stop of the race. So that's put Mark Webber into the lead of the race. And that will surely put Takuma Sato 2nd. Yes, there he goes. Now, where can Montoya rejoin? He'll rejoin behind Raikkonen. Probably behind Alonso as well. Yep. Will he rejoin ahead of Adrian Sutil? That's the question. Sutil and Kubica yet to make their only pit stops. Sutil's in the pits, actually, so Montoya should rejoin in 5th position. He does, yes. Kubica 6th. Sutil dropping down the order a little bit. And that'll put Hülkenberg up to 7th. Now, where will that put Nico Rosberg? Will that put him ahead? Maybe. Let's see what happens as we go through the fiddly sectors now. With Mark Webber, we're looking at race leader. From Canberra, Australia. And there's his nearest championship rival, who sits 27 points ahead of him in the championship, Takuma Sato. 2-time champion already, reigning champion, looking to make it 3 in a row. Kimi Raikkonen won the first championship in the 2004 season, and then 2005 saw an epic battle between 5 drivers that consisted of Takuma Sato, Kimi Raikkonen, Michael Schumacher, and a couple of other drivers as well. I think Fernando Alonso may have been one of them, but don't count on me for that one. 2006 was won by Takuma Sato at the last race. I think he won it from Montoya, actually. Again, correct me if I'm wrong. So we are looking at Kimi Raikkonen, the possibly 3-stopping Kimi Raikkonen, who now sits 3rd in the race, behind Webber and Sato. Fernando Alonso locking his tyre going into 5-ish. We've had quite a lot of retirements in this race. We've had 7 retirements that consist of both Ferraris, Trulli and Vettel. Perez and Massa also retired. Timo Glock, Christian Albers and Alexander Wurz. All 7 of those drivers have retired. Glock's and somebody else's. In fact, it may have just been Glock who's retired with a mechanical issue, because Albers and Suttil collided, Perez and Massa collided, Vettel was involved in a shunt, and Trulli was involved in a shunt. So Timo Glock is the only driver to have had a mechanically related retirement so far in this race. Suspension, I believe it was. The rest have all got involved with other people. So Webber's extending his lead between himself and Takuma Sato. The gap is 6 seconds as they started this lap, going through the first sector. I'd expect Webber to extend that gap a little bit more. And there's Kimi Raikkonen in third. Let's see the gap between himself and Alonso. It's staying static at 2.5 seconds. And he's 12 and a bit seconds behind Mark Webber in the race lead. So if Raikkonen is 3 stopping, then it's not going to work out. I'd expect the gaps to be a bit too big to make an impact on the race lead. So it is looking good for Mark Webber to take his 3rd win of the season, if he can hang on to his reliability. There's Jenson Button, who sits in 8th position now, so he has made some sort of recovery. He's now challenging Nico Rosberg for 7th position. And just behind is Daniel Ricciardo for 9th position. And there's Heidfeld, who sits 10th now, so he's made some sort of recovery as well. And if he finishes in the points, that will help BMW Sauber's cause in the Constructors' Championship. As he brakes hard into the tight chicane, that was where the incident between Trulli and Hamilton occurred a few laps ago. Would make sense that Trulli understeered off on the left and then spun it round. So here's Takuma Sato. We're now on lap 40 of the race, and he sits in 2nd position at the moment, in between Webber and Raikkonen. Adrian Suttil has got Rubens Barrichello right behind him now. That's a battle for 11th position between the Spiker and the Williams, and it looks as if the Williams, having made an unscheduled pit stop, has got a comeback on the cards in some form. That's power from the Ferrari engine. Yeah, we're seeing quite a significant difference in power between some of these teams. Renault's, it seems, doesn't have the power compared to other teams, whereas the Ferrari engine looks to be very good in a straight line. Although I think, yes, Barrichello has actually taken the position off of Adrian Suttil, so he's up to 11th. Now, can he do something about any of the drivers in front? It's possible that Heidfeld could still make this a 2-stop strategy, even though he made that early first pit stop, because he's still showing as only having made 1 pit stop so far. So BMW Sauber might have been a bit shrewd about this one. At the moment, his tyres are getting a bit old. They're at least a good 30 laps old now compared to some of the other teams. Barrichello locking up slightly, going into the fiddly right, now the fiddly left. And now the final corner. We still got Adrian Suttil behind him. Suttil running the Toyota engine. Same Toyota engine that's being used to lead the race in the form of Mark Webber. As down the main straight. Now we switch to Kimi Raikkonen going through the tight chicane. Needs to push hard if he's going to make any impact on the race lead. Unless McLaren have fueled him to the end. We'll see what happens. There certainly was an early 2nd pit stop that Raikkonen made, and Hulkenberg for that matter. Hulkenberg now running in 6th position, and he's 7 seconds behind Montoya in 5th position at the moment, who I'm pretty sure is going to the end of the race, having made his first pit stop well after half distance, probably his only stop. Here's Hamilton going round the long right. Not a good race for Hamilton. Had that incident with Jarno Trulli early in the race. Unfortunate incident, I have to say. Certainly not his fault, just caught up in the wrong place at the wrong time. Now the gap between Raikkonen and Alonso is 3.2 seconds, and they're remaining about static actually. And we saw Alonso struggling a little bit in the mid part of the race. Lost that position to Nico Hülkenberg, but now we know that Hülkenberg was running much lighter. Into the tight chicane goes Raikkonen. Heidfeld now makes his second pit stop, and I'm fairly sure that BMW Sauber will fuel him to the end of the race. The gap between Webber and Sato is 7.4 seconds, so it does look as if the Toyota is the quicker car compared to the Honda, in race trim at least. Then again, Webber could just be running a much lighter fuel load, but Webber was one of the last of the first stoppers to pit. As out of the pits comes Nick Heidfeld, so he's now a lap down compared to Mark Webber, and he may well go a lap down on Takuma Sato as well. So there's a look at the race leader, rounding turn 4 now. Not too bad through there, into 5-ish, and that's equally as good. So that stop of Heidfeld has moved in behind Hamilton, still ahead of Matthias Lauda, but Lauda probably will gain about 25-30 seconds on the German. And here is Sato about to lap said German of Heidfeld. It's about half a minute that Lauda gained on Heidfeld, thanks to the Sauber's pit stop. So the gap between Sato and Raikkonen about static at 5.5 seconds as we went through the middle sector. So Raikkonen is not exactly gaining on Sato, not exactly pulling away from Alonso either. So I'm not 100% sure of what sort of fuel load that Raikkonen has got compared to the others. He did pull away quite a lot from the field at the beginning of the race. That was down to a lighter fuel load, but whether they have moved the second pit stop forward, or whether he is indeed 3-stopping, we'll have to find out. Webber goes round turn 4, the long turn 4, and the gap between himself and Sato now at 8 seconds, and Sato's not going to be helped by the traffic in front of him. Should be able to lap him going down this next straight, and Heidfeld now is moving out of the way. So that's good driving, good awareness from Heidfeld, allowing Sato to get along with his own race as Jenson Button is in the pits. Runs 7th position actually, so he's not done too badly. We'll probably rejoin in the mix. He aims to get him out into the points still, but we'll keep an eye out on that. His teammate going about his business at the front. Button dropping down to 10th so far. Now down to 11th. Suttle has gained a position. Now down to 12th. That was Kubica gaining position, now down to 13th. And there he goes, Jenson Button exiting the pits. And he's about to go a lap down. Lapped by his own teammates, that's just how badly Button's race has gone. Won the last 2 races, so that's a big change in fortunes. But at least Button rejoined ahead of Nick Heidfeld. So there's a look at one of the McLarens, I think that is Kimi Raikkonen, yellow T-cam. And it is Kimi Raikkonen, so there's Alonso behind, in 4th position. Montoya sits 5th at the moment. The key question is, can Webber make his pit stop and rejoin ahead of ahead of Alonso for a start, but more importantly ahead of Juan Pablo Montoya. These next few laps are going to be crucial, and Webber doesn't need this at the moment. Jenson Button in his way. Looking back from Mark Webber, probably should be the other way around actually, should be looking forward from Webber as we go into the final corner. Coming out of the final corner, and is that Jenson Button about to move out of the way? Yes it is. Jenson Button lets his teammate through, so now Webber is free to push a bit more before his second pit stop. And starting lap 46, we've got 22 laps to go in this 67 lap race. And despite being slightly held up behind his own teammate, Webber did actually extend the gap to Sato by a tenth in that final sector. Fernando Alonso makes his second pit stop. Be interesting to see where he rejoins, particularly in relation to Nico Hülkenberg. Probably behind the German. But, in fact, it might well be close. So let's see what happens in that pit stop as we go on board with, could well be Jenson Button we're on board with. Sits in 13th position. Has a slim chance of points on the cards, but it will be a tight one. And Hülkenberg did jump Alonso for 5th position, so that's quite crucial in terms of Hülkenberg's race. Meanwhile, the gap between Sato and Raikkonen starting to come down slightly. It was just a tenth in that middle sector as Kubica and Hamilton do battle down the main straight for 11th position. Let's see the power difference between a Mercedes engine and a Renault engine. They look quite good from the Mercedes. I think Kubica was having a go back at Hamilton going into the first corner. Webber's in the pits. Mark Webber's in the pits. Now the target to try and get out ahead of Juan Pablo Montoya. The gap is 27.8 seconds. So Sato and Raikkonen take the first and second position places briefly. But where is Webber in relation to Juan Pablo Montoya? Keep an eye on the timing screen on the bottom. Has he rejoined ahead of Montoya? I think he has done. Webber has jumped Montoya in this second round of pit stops. We're having a look at Takuma Sato, race leader at the moment. And it's just confirmed on the graphic. Webber is in 3rd position and should rejoin the lead once Sato and Raikkonen make their pit stops. Speaking of which, Daniel Ricciardo is now making his pit stop. Second pit stop it should be. This is Raikkonen, who's tucked up behind Nick Heidfeld at the moment. And that's not going to do Raikkonen's race too much good if he has to make another pit stop. I think that's Heidfeld just about getting out of the way now. Yes, indeed it is. And is that Kubica? That's Kubica behind Hamilton, and Hamilton is starting to pull away from the Renault driver now. Kubica looked like he was having a minor issue getting out of the first couple of corners. And the gap between himself and Button coming down slightly. So rounding 5-ish goes Kubica. That's Hamilton in front, and in front of Hamilton is Adrian Sutil. There is 3rd placed Mark Webber, and he's actually a long way in front of Montoya. I'm a little bit confused by that. I'm going to take a guess that Montoya's had some sort of issues somewhere. I haven't seen it in terms of yellow flags, but he's quite a way behind Mark Webber. So that's a curious one, actually. We're on board with Rubens Barrichello now. Now we switch to Kimi Raikkonen, who put that lap on Nick Heidfeld, and is going to try and resume his chase of Takuma Sato, who sits in the race lead at the moment. So rounding the final couple of corners. Is Sato going to make a pit stop? Is Raikkonen going to make a pit stop? I think Sato was making a pit stop, so Raikkonen is now back in the lead of the race. But for how much longer? Hamilton versus Sutil going into 3, that's not going to work, but it's clear that Hamilton has a much quicker car than Adrian Sutil at this stage of the race. Sutil one stopping. Hamilton, how many pit stops has he made? He might well have made 2 pit stops already. Yes, he has done, because he had that incident with Trulli. So it's Kimi Raikkonen who resumes the race lead from Mark Webber. Gap is 16 seconds there or thereabouts. It's 15.6, but round that up to 16. But the important question is, can Kimi Raikkonen go to the end of the race, or does he have another pit stop to make? Sato rejoined in 3rd position ahead of Juan Pablo Montoya. So Montoya's one-stop strategy didn't quite work out as well as he'd hoped, having briefly led that race before making his first pit stop. Sits in 4th position at the moment. Now this is Hamilton versus Suttle going down the main straight, and that looks like a position gain for Lewis Hamilton. Can he keep it as we go into the braking zone of the first corner? Let's keep an eye on the timing screens as we switch to Mark Webber. Looking good in terms of closing in on Takuma Sato's championship lead. And I think remarkably Suttle managed to hang on to that 9th position because he's still ahead of Hamilton. So I don't know how Hamilton didn't manage to make the overtake stick. He's going to try and have a look at the inside of 5-ish, not quite making that one work. Both these teams running Bridgestone tyres, the Spiker and the Super Aguri. And the other team running Bridgestones is Ferrari. Both of those drivers are out of the race. But luckily for Ferrari, Heidfeld down in 14th position doesn't look as if he's close to scoring points. So their position is safe at the moment as Rosberg comes into the pits from 7th position. Where's that going to put the Toro Rosso driver? We'll find out once his pit stop is complete and he exits the pit lane. As take 2, Suttle versus Hamilton, down the main straight. And this time around it looks as if Hamilton has made that one stick, but is Suttle going to have a look back up the inside, going into turn 1? Big lock-up for Mark Webber, going into the fiddly left. And Raikkonen is in the pits, so he did have to make a third pit stop, so this will put Mark Webber back into the lead of the race. There's your answer. Raikkonen was 3-stopping, and I'm imagining Nico Hülkenberg will be 3-stopping as well. Now can Raikkonen rejoin ahead of Takuma Sato? Let's keep an eye out on the right hand side, or the timing graphic. And there we go, Sato rejoins ahead of, well, Raikkonen rejoins behind Sato rather, as Jenson Button now running in 12th position, looking to try and take away that 11th and 10th place off of Rosberg and Kubica. That's not going to be easy. Rosberg has just made a pit stop, rejoined in the points. And now it's Kubica who seems likely to become under pressure from the recovering Button. And Hülkenberg I think was in the pits because I saw it on the graphic. Yep, in the pits, and he's going to rejoin, where's he going to rejoin? 7th by the looks of it. So that's still not a bad effort. Even if the 3-stop strategy wasn't probably the best one to go for. As demonstrated by this driver here, Kimi Raikkonen. Having to make that extra pit stop has cost him the race lead and 2nd place. He's not far behind Takuma Sato, mind you, just 1.7 seconds off of the Japanese driver, so can Kimi Raikkonen use fresher tyres to make an impact into finishing 2nd? If he does, then that will help Mark Webber enormously. Let's keep an eye out on the gaps. 7.8 between Webber and Sato. It's still 1.7 between Sato and Raikkonen. So Raikkonen's going to have to do something special if he's going to take 2nd place. Suttle having some issues with his steering, going out of the tight chicane and then into the fiddly final sector. I think he's got it all under control now. Now in 9th place is Suttle, so not too bad an effort from 14th on the grid. They're using his 1-stop strategy to try and get him up the order, and Rubens Barrichello making another pit stop. So he had that unscheduled one earlier on, so this will be his 3rd stop of the race. That's going to drop him down the order. Going to put Nico Hülkenberg back up into 6th position, so more points for the Super Aguri driver. Hamilton 7th now, Suttle 8th, Rosberg 9th, Button 10th. Button has got ahead of Kubica. That's a key one for himself, and a key one for Toyota's Constructors' Championship Challenge. So Barrichello probably will rejoin ahead of Nick Heidfeld in 13th position. Not a good race for Williams once again, unfortunately, with Massa out of the race and Rubens Barrichello unlikely to score points. Now, is that Matthias Lauda? It is indeed. Having gone a lap down on Juan Pablo Montoya, looks as if he wants that lap back. So it is Mark Webber who is nearly 8 seconds ahead of Takuma Sato. And Sato's got 1.8 seconds over Kimi Raikkonen for second position. There is Montoya, who sits in 4th position. And behind him is Matthias Lauda, but he's a lap down. Hamilton's making another pit stop, so he's going to drop down the order a bit. That's going to put Suttle up to 7th position. So we're seeing all sorts of strategies going on here, mixture of 2 and 3, and a few drivers doing 1 as well. And look where it's got them. Sato versus Raikkonen. The gap's still not coming down as much as Raikkonen would hope, as Jenson Button gets it a little bit understeery going through the long turn 4 as he tries to chase Adrian Suttle. The 2nd position now. Somewhere along the lines Button has taken Rosberg as well, so Jenson Button is having a good fight back in this later stage of the race as he rounds the tight chicane. And there's Raikkonen doing what he can to try and close up on Takuma Sato, but it's staying static at 1.8 seconds, and if anything, Sato was the quicker driver on that last lap. So, looking good for Takuma Sato if he stays in 2nd position. And it's clear that the 3 stops hasn't really worked out for Raikkonen, and even on newer tyres compared to Sato, he can't do anything about it. But we've still got best part of 13 laps to go. There's a blown engine, that's a Renault that's gone, and it looks like Daniel Ricciardo out of the race. He was running in 11th place at the time, and that position now goes to Rubens Barrichello. They'll move Nick Heidfeld up to 12th position, and then Matthias Lauda up to 13th, so we'll be down to... They'll move Hamilton up to 13th position, then it will move Lauda up to 14th. So Daniel Ricciardo becomes the 8th retirement of the race with a blown engine spewing out of the back of the Renault engine, Renault car, Renault rear wing. The Renault, which has won a race this season courtesy of Robert Kubica at the mayhem-riddled race at Monaco. That could have seen Fernando Alonso take a victory there, but was wrong-footed by Montoya, who has a lap down, going into Anthony Nogue's corner. Both drivers crashed out, and that put Kubica into the race lead. From that driver there, Nick Heidfeld, who took BMW Sauber's only podium finish of the season so far. So Heidfeld now running 12th, needs a couple more retirements if he's going to score points, because he's certainly not going to do it on pace. Down the main straight. Now we switch to Mark Webber, who goes onto the main straight actually, so Webber has got Heidfeld in front of him and is going to lap him probably within the next 10 laps or so. You can see the mixture of stops. Webber and Sato have made 2 stops. Raikkonen made 3, Montoya just the 1. Heidfeld and Heidfeld Lauda have made 2, Hamilton 3. And then the mixture of 2 stops and 3 stops for Hülkenberg, 2 for Alonso. Suttle, I think, has just made the 1. And will probably come under pressure from Jenson Button soon. That's a battle we need to see probably within the next couple of laps, actually. Yeah, the gap is only 0.3 of a second between Suttle and Button, so Button could well have a 7th place on the cards if he gets ahead of the Spiker driver, who's once again doing quite well. There's Mark Webber going through the tight chicane. And there's the battle, Suttle versus Button for 7th position. Button getting alongside down the main straight, the same engine in these two, so the power outputs will be very similar. And Jenson Button taking the position, but Suttle was looking at having a go back and braking into the first corner. And there's nearly contact between the two, and Suttle has retaken that position. Well, he's not taking that one lying down, is Adrian, and holds on to 7th for now. Well, Button's task of taking 7th position looks to be a bit tricky. And behind these two, we've got Nico Rosberg lurking, looking to try and capitalise on any instance that these two might have. I've seen a couple of collisions this race. Perez versus Massa, and then it was Ricciardo versus Vettel into this corner here. And was that contact between the two? Of Jensen giving Adrian some back. Look at that. Some firm racing between those two. And now Jensen Button takes that 7th position with an equally as firm move on Suttle as what Adrian did to Jensen earlier in the lap. Raikkonen closing in on Sato. Now the gap was just a second, but he'll have lost some of that closing in on that mistake at turn 5-ish. Now he's got to do some of that hard work again, but now Raikkonen getting a move on. Rosberg, that's versus Suttle, so Rosberg's going to try and take Suttle for 8th position, and that was quite simple down the main straight, but we know how feisty Adrian can be. Keep an eye on the right hand side, because there might be a spiker there, but Rosberg has got it. Suttle did have a look back, but it wasn't quite enough. Didn't quite have the grip. His tyres beginning to give way now with that one-stop strategy. And now look at that. Robert Kubica immediately onto the back of the spiker driver. Where can the Polish driver make the move? Not into 5-ish. Can he do it into the tight chicane? We've seen Button do that on the previous lap. Not sure if Kubica's close enough to make a real move. But here comes the slipstream. Here comes Mark Webber through turn 4 now. Keep an eye on the timing screen at the bottom. Who have we got? Alonso putting a lap on Lauda. And Rosberg did hang on to Suttle. Has Suttle hang on to Kubica? I think he's still ahead, yes. Suttle still in 9th place at the moment from Robert Kubica. That battle will rage on till the very end. So down the main straight, we're on board with Nico Rosberg. And it's worth mentioning as well that Lauda is the only driver who has been lapped. Heidfeld and Hamilton both regained their laps when Webber and Sato made their pit stops, and Raikkonen for that matter, as up the inside of Suttle goes Kubica. That is a position gain for the Renault driver. So Suttle down to 10th place. Has got 7 odd seconds, 6 seconds over Rubens Barrichello. But Rubens Barrichello does sniff a point if Suttle is in tyre trouble. As we are on board with one of the two McLarens down the main straight. Could be Kimi Raikkonen, I think. 1.4 seconds behind Takuma Sato now. Suttle once again struggling with his tyres going into the tight chicane. Hasn't fully given up on retaking 9th place off of Robert Kubica, but I think his attention should shift to Rubens Barrichello now, who's closing in pretty quickly. 4.4 seconds as they cross the second sector point. And keep an eye out on the gap between Heidfeld and Hamilton as well. That's just 5 seconds. Hamilton did 3 stop. Heidfeld made an early second pit stop, so there could be a battle there. And who knows, if Suttle and Barrichello have a calamitous incident that results in the retirement of both, then they could be battling for the points, so you never know with Heidfeld and Hamilton. Mark Webber's lead, 9.2 seconds over Takuma Sato. So again, it does seem that the Toyota of Mark Webber is the quicker car compared to the Honda of Takuma Sato, and Webber's justifying that by pulling out ever so slightly, and it's a comfortable gap. Not so comfortable is Sato versus Raikkonen for 2nd position. And now Heidfeld running into a bit of tyre trouble, going through 5-ish, locking his left front tyre. Seen a number of lockups this race, and most tyres will probably look like octagons. And square wheels is not the quickest way to go. Montoya holding on to 4th place at the moment, ahead of Fernando Alonso in 5th. Then the impressive Nico Hülkenberg in the Super Aguri, my drive of the race, I have to say. Even on that 3-stop strategy, made good use out of it from 13th on the grid. And as a result, sits in 6th place. Jensen Button 7th, Nico Rosberg 8th, Toro Rosso desperate for some points. A season of turmoil in some ways, with ditching Ralf Schumacher for Alexander Wurz, and then but that's pretty much rounding out the back most of the time. So that'll be a welcome boost for the Italian team that took over from Minardi. Kubica in 9th place, having one stopped, as has Adrian Sutil, but it seems as if the Bridgestones are wearing a bit quicker on the Spiker compared to the Michelins of the Renault. Rubens Barrichello 3.7 seconds behind Adrian Sutil, so that gap is still coming down. And Sutil is still only a second behind Kubica, so he's not fully given up on retaking 9th position, doing what he can. And doing what he can is Kimi Räikkönen, but it's not enough compared to Takuma Sato. The gap is now 1.6 seconds, so I think Sato does have the measure of the McLaren driver. Through the kinks, into the heavy braking zone of the chicane. And it's going to take some sort of mistake to separate these two. And both of these drivers, champions, mistakes don't look likely for either of them. The gap between Heidfeld and Hamilton coming down still, 3.9 seconds, so there could be a battle between those two come the end of the race. And 3.3 seconds the gap between Sutil and Barrichello. So that gap still coming down. We could see a battle for 10th in the final few laps. As we go on board with Mark Webber, who's about to put a lap on Lewis Hamilton. So Hamilton's charge on Heidfeld could well be halted, because once the leader gets close to you, you have to let them through. It's just the way these drivers are programmed. Into 5-ish, the long streak of rubber at the braking zone where a lot of drivers have locked up. Some mountains in the distance. And Takuma Sato in 2nd position, doing what he can to try and maintain some sort of control in the championship. Mark Webber would close in by 7 points, but as long as Sato keeps finishing 2nd, then he would become champion. But he's still got another couple of races after this, and they are the Chinese Grand Prix at Shanghai, and then the final race at Interlagos, the Brazilian Grand Prix. So Hamilton is now going to let Mark Webber through. Sensible driving. Hamilton in 13th position, Mark Webber in 1st. Next driver to lap for Mark Webber would be Nick Heidfeld, running in 12th position. We've now got 5 laps to go for Mark Webber, and now these two, Sato and Räikkönen. And then a few seconds further back, you can see in the distance is Montoya in 4th position, so 3rd and 4th would be a good boost for McLaren. 15 for 3rd place and 12 points for 4th place, but 25 points for a win, and 7th place would give you 6 points, so Toyota would still extend their lead in the championship if it stays like this. Out of 5-ish comes Kimi Räikkönen, and then you'll see his quarry in front of him, which is Takuma Sato, but seems unlikely that Räikkönen is going to close up and make some sort of move on the Honda driver. His final set of Pirelli is not working as well as he'd hoped, it seems. Looking into the possible lineups for next season, you can see that we can reveal that BMW Sauber are looking to switch from Michelin's to Pirellis, but that is speculative at the moment. And it seems that McLaren's may well inherit some BMW engines for next season. Again, all speculative, but that's the rumour mill that's going around at the moment. I'm looking forward to when the lineups are being revealed and see which driver has signed which. For now, we'll concentrate on this race at the moment, and you can see the movers and losers on the left. Mark Webber's gained 4th from his 5th place on the grid. And you can see Rubens Barrichello down 9. That's not a good race for him. A good race for Nico Rosberg, actually, from 16th on the grid. He's now running 8th. Good strategy, 2 stops, and staying out of trouble. Hulkenberg up 7th as well, good race for himself. And then not such a good race for Nick Heidfeld, down 2 places from his 10th place grid slot. And then there was another driver down a few positions as well. Montoya, pole position, one-stop strategy, and currently sits 4th. He's not that far ahead of Fernando Alonso, actually. Only 3 and a bit seconds, so there could be a battle between those two if things go badly wrong for Montoya. I've just spotted on the timing graphic that Barrichello is now right behind Adrian Sutil. So Sutil's one-stop strategy is now beginning to come to a head because he's got Rubens Barrichello chasing him for that final point. The recovering Rubens Barrichello after what was a mid-race mechanical issue, probably a gear selection issue, needed remedying with a new steering wheel. So if we could have a look at that, that would be pretty good. Raikkonen starting to close in a little bit on Takuma Sato. It was down to 1.5 seconds, but with 3 laps to go, and with Sato just keeping Raikkonen in check, doesn't look likely as if Raikkonen will mount a serious challenge on Sato come the end of the race. As they both break into the tight chicane. And I think Hamilton being lapped by Mark Webber has halted his charge on Nick Heidfeld for 12th position as well. So through the final sector, there's Sato, there's Raikkonen. But there's some 10 seconds behind Mark Webber now, who's used his 2-stop strategy well, used his first stop to jump ahead of Takuma Sato, which is a good effort, and then since then he's looked good. Sutil Barrichello, that's separated by just a second. 2 laps to go for this lot. Sutil Barrichello still have a good nearly 3 laps to go to resolve their battle, as they have not been lapped by Mark Webber. And Montoya should be safe from Alonso for 4th position as well. So, rounding turn 5-ish on their penultimate lap, Sato versus Raikkonen. I suspect both will be pushing quite hard, but maybe Sato's got a little bit of reserve. Maybe Raikkonen's final set of Pirellis haven't really worked out. I mean, that's probably my most likely explanation, because the 3-stop strategy, using the lighter fuel load as Matthias Lauda has a bit of a lock-up, sits 14th and last. He started 15th as well, so he has gained a position, but 8 drivers have retired, so still running in the race though, so that'll give him some good experience. Webber goes on to his final lap now, as we briefly switch to Robert Kubica in 9th place. And look at that, that is Sutil Barrichello for 10th position. Is something going to happen between those two? They are in their penultimate lap actually. So going through turn 5-ish goes Kubica, and then Sutil, then Barrichello. And somewhere behind this lot is Mark Webber, who is on his final lap and looks good to take a victory. That's Kimi Raikkonen going through 4. Here is Mark Webber. Can he see a battle in front? He can see Nick Heidfeld in front of him. Heidfeld doesn't want to go a lap down on Mark Webber, because if something happens between Sutil and Barrichello, then that is Nick Heidfeld scoring a point. But in any case, let's keep an eye out on Mark Webber, who's won 2 races already this season, and at a time where Toyota are hitting a strong run of form with 2 1-2 finishes in the past 2 races at Monza and Spa. This will continue their good run of form, because onto the main straight goes Mark Webber. It is a long run to the checkered flag, but taking his 3rd win of the season will be Mark Webber for Toyota. That is their 6th win of the season, and there's confirmation of it. Mark Webber wins the Japanese Grand Prix.
Fantastic drive, great job.
So looking further back, Sato will finish 2nd ahead of Kimi Raikkonen. And it was 1.4 seconds come the end, so that cements Sato's 2nd place in the race, Kimi Raikkonen's 3rd. The gap will come down between Sato and Webber. Was 27 points, will round to 20 points, but no panic just yet for Sato, as Montoya and Alonso come home in 4th and 5th. And Barrichello has taken Sutil somewhere on this final lap. He's taken him probably on the main straight going into their final laps. So Rubens Barrichello will get a point for Williams. And here's Nico Hulkenberg about to cross the line. My driver of the race, Hulkenberg, used his 3-stop strategy pretty well to go from 13th all the way up to 6th. Jenson Button, horrid first half of the race, but it sets a fastest lap on the final lap, so that's not bad. Just shows how good the Toyota car was. And points for Nico Rosberg. That's a welcome boost for the Toro Rosso team. And Kubica finishes 9th. Only just ahead of Rubens Barrichello, so Rubens had a flying final lap, taking Suttil and nearly Kubica as well. So that's confirmation of the results. Mark Webber from Sato and Raikkonen. 10 seconds for Mark Webber in the end. So we shall see you for the penultimate race of the season, the Chinese Grand Prix at Shanghai.